We use triggers all the time to spawn enemies, to trigger dialogues, and also to trigger more complicated sequences of events that help tell the story or show the player where to go and what to do. So today we're going to build a reusable trigger. We've got a simple setup. I've got a player and a trigger which has a sprite render and a trigger box collider and a dialogue instance from my previous tutorial. The goal is to trigger this dialogue when the player enters the trigger. Let's create a new trigger zone script on our trigger. We're going to use the built-in onTriggerEnter and onTriggerExit methods, but since we want to trigger events outside of our code, we will use Unity events. We will create two public Unity events for the onTriggerEnter and onTriggerExit. This gives us a really cool inspector that allows us to reference anything from the scene and trigger any public methods on it. In my case, I'm accessing the dialogue instance and I'm triggering the dialogue. Finally, we have to invoke these events, or actually call them, with these two lines. So that will call all of the functions you've added here. This is our code so far. It will work perfectly fine. However, you will notice that you can trigger it multiple times. One of the ways to fix this is to add 3 new variables. Then, if we've already entered, do nothing. Otherwise, if it's one shot, then update the already entered variable. And then we do the same for the onTriggerExit. Back in the editor, if you enable one shot, you will notice that it will only trigger once. You might notice that there is one more problem, which is that any other object can trigger the dialogue. Easiest way to fix this is to use tags. So let's create a string tag and then just check if the object has that tag or not. So back in the editor, we're going to write player in the collision tag. Now when you test it out, you will see that only the player can trigger the dialogue. You can also do this with layers, and there are many ways to expand on this code, but this is a good starting point.